Alright, today we're going to make our Pinch Pot monsters. To begin, once you get your name on that yellow tray, you'll come up to me to get your first ball of clay. This is just for that pinch pot. Then you're going to need to go grab a placemat, a fork, call these a pencil tool, smoothing kind of curvy stick like this. And then at the middle table you'll be able to kind of search for some different texture items. Now that first step that we're going to do is to create that pinch pot. So to begin, you're going to roll it into a ball. Now you can either kind of put it between your hands and roll back and forth like this, or you can move your placemat aside and just simply roll in a circle like this on your table. It doesn't need to be perfect, but do it for a little bit just to kind of smooth it out. Then step 2 is to take your thumbs up dude, and push that thumb hole as far as you can without going through the bottom. Then remember, it's called a pinch pot, so we're going to now start kind of pinching and pushing and pulling to open this up. I actually like to kind of focus more so on just the pushing and kind of the pulling to make it bigger versus the pinching, because a lot of times it will just get too skinny or maybe crack when I pinch it too hard. So now you can see I can get both thumbs in there. I can almost use like a swimming motion to stretch it out further. Now you could either try to just make it as wide as you possibly can, or if you want yours to be a little more taller, I can kind of show you from the side view here, you can kind of pull up with your fingers as you do this. So I'm using these to kind of push those walls up higher. This will give me more height to my monster. And I just kind of keep rotating and doing that, and you can see I got it to go a lot taller already. Okay, so do that for a little bit until you get it to about the thickness of your pinky. That is where you're going to want to stop. Then, before you kind of move on, you need to kind of rethink to your sketch and decide, were you doing that first style where the pinch pot goes up like this and then you can store stuff inside it? Were you deciding to flip your pinch pot upside down? Then you could add stuff on the top too even. Or were you going to put it on its side and have this opening be like the mouth? After you decide that, I'm going to ask that you go to the texture tools and try to find a couple that you like. Now, to kind of test them, you could take an extra piece of clay from the big bucket and you could just kind of flatten it with your hand. And then you could use this to kind of roll some textures on to see what they look like. This kind of style, you just kind of push on like a stamp. Oh, that's kind of cool. And you can flip this over and test more. These rolling pin ones, you simply just roll right on. And these are kind of cool too because they even have a little like stamp on the bottom of them. So once you discover one that you like, then try your best to put your hand inside your pinch pot and try to roll that texture onto the outside of your pinch pot. We want to try to give it a texture before we add all those features on. So that looks kind of cool there. It's kind of like a bumpy kind of shell texture. Now I'm going to just kind of keep mine up like this so then you can see how I add things onto it. Now that I got a texture on there, I need to get more clay to start making some features. Now let's start with like an eye. A lot of us, to make an eye, you might want to grab a small piece of clay, roll it in between your hands, and then what you could almost do, zoom out a little bit more, is then you could flatten it with your hand. And you could simply then use that pencil tool to kind of push in some holes for the eyes if you would like. Or, like I did on this one here, I made another smaller piece of clay and added it on there and then poked a hole in there. Now, one thing we haven't talked much about this so far this year is when we add clay to each other, we have to do something called scoring to make sure it doesn't come off. So let's say I want this eye to go right here. What I need to do next is take my fork, do some little scratches, scratch where it goes, and then I simply dip my finger in the water cup and gently add some water to each of those scratches. I can then kind of gently push and kind of wiggle them onto each other, and then I can either use my finger to kind of smooth it together more, or that's where this kind of curved wooden tool comes into play. You can use this sometimes to smooth the clay together that your fingers can't quite reach. This will just make sure that it's really strong when we're all done. But I need to remember to do that to anything. Even that small little circle I added onto here, I first scratched it. So let's go ahead and add one more eye here, and then I just want to show you two more things. Okay, so just every little thing that you're attaching, you got to do that scoring. And look at that, it's looking kind of cute so far. Now, remember our goal is to make as many things as our age. And I typically like to just use these fingers the most when I'm sculpting and molding. Let's say I want to make a sharp tooth. I can kind of take these fingers and pinch them together like this and keep turning my little piece and pinch, and you can see it will kind of make it to a point. Then I can use my other hands or that thumb to kind of flatten this area so I have a spot to score. And then remember, scratch. Let's put one big tooth on the bottom here. Then I scratch where it goes. Water, water. And then I can gently get in there and push that tooth on there real good. Huh, looking awesome. Now let's pretend that I want to make like a lot of spikes or maybe a tail. One thing that could be good for that is to take a piece of clay, maybe set your placemat aside and just roll it back and forth. And you want to just gently push down at first. And what's going to happen is it's going to make a long coil. Then if I pick one side and push down a little harder as I roll, it will make it to a point. Now the last thing I want you to remember though is we talked about if I add something like really big sticking up like this, like a tail or a spike, that could be kind of fragile when the whole thing's sticking off like this. So I want to try to kind of keep it attached back to the body. So let's say if this was going to be my tail, I could first score it on to the back part here. But then maybe I want to, once I get it on, instead of just leaving it, remember I can use my fingers for this, or use that wooden tool and kind of use that to smooth it into the body. Okay. But then maybe instead of leaving this whole thing sticking out like this, maybe I want to try to curve it back inwards a little bit. Having that curve down like this would be less fragile than having it stick all the way out. And if I really want to make sure it's not going to break, I could possibly even score it back onto this part of the body too. Then that would be really on there good. So you're the artist. Continue to kind of sculpt these little pieces. Remember, we're working with a sculpture too, so you want to think about all sides and the back and the top. And our goal was to add as many things as our age. Here's some other items that I'm going to be adding on. Now, too, just to remind you, you can kind of test things. You can put some things on here and see if you like it, but then just don't forget to go back and score it on if you decide to keep it there. All right, have fun.